What's up, guys? It's your boy Zowoki back out with another Chris Watts video, and we are continuing from yesterday with Behind Criminal Minds, watching, for me, part 2 of what we watched yesterday of the new testimony revealing a secret second app and so forth. Again, take it with a grain of salt. It's somebody else's opinion and alleged theory and so forth, but it definitely completely makes sense. And we're going to be watching Behind Criminal Minds video. So before we go any further, if you guys could do me a solid favor and subscribe to my YouTube channel by hitting that wiper icon down at the bottom right. Hit that bell icon next to it, so when I do post videos like this one, you guys will get that little ring notification that I've posted that video, and then you guys can watch, comment, like, and share. And again, I thank you guys so very much for that love and support that you guys show on my channel every single day. Please keep doing what you guys are doing, and hopefully one day we'll continue to keep growing to 100K. Show that same love at Behind Criminal Minds. Link is in the description. Again, if you want to watch it without my commentary, my reaction, go over to Behind Criminal Minds and watch it over there. But for those that want to watch it with me, let's get into it.
Trustworthy person. Of course, now we know that his response was a complete and utter lie, but you will want to remember his undeniable tell. When Chris Watts lies, he describes himself as someone who friends and family would call trustworthy.
So that's what those shoes do.
Wood.
Winter shoes. They're what? Winter shoes. Those are fur boots, aren't they? So I'm just gonna sell them off to like that Facebook marketplace and share them on the windowsill there. And when we got back to North Carolina, she saw them sitting over there, and she proceeded to take them back and wear them every day since they got back. Remember, it was 100 degrees outside or what? She loved those shoes. She always loves those shoes. Bella.
I can't remember if he said Bella loved those shoes, like the past tense kind of thing, you know, when somebody's gone.
She always wore some flip-flops. She always will. She's just like, she loved that dress.
She always wore this. He's giving himself away.
It's like the buttons in the back.
Everything we just heard rings at the heart of why so many people were so affected by this case. For just a moment, erase everything you know about this case. Imagine.
Plus, for me, I have 2 girls, 1 boy. Okay, maybe the girls are not biologically mine, but I still love them if they were my own. And it bothers me so much because Chris is supposed to be the protector, the love, the safeguarding, or the safe guard that is in their life to protect them, and he took it away. He removed it because he wanted a new woman. That makes no sense.
Imagine that all we know is that this is a father sitting.
And that's where I think that Nicole Kessinger needs to be looked at and brought to justice, because she possibly was a catalyst to this crime.
In a police station interview room on the heels of his entire family seemingly disappearing into thin air. So then why is he not showing any emotion? Why is he laughing and acting like this is a time to casually reflect on his daughter's favorite items of clothing? You see, what Chris doesn't seem to understand is that his behavior alone could have convicted him in front of a jury without any other evidence. No father who claims to love his children would be sitting there while they are missing with such an apathetic and indifferent disposition. Even a psychopath would find a way to fabricate the appearance of concern. But I suppose that's why law enforcement wasn't able to profile Chris.
He shows
because
nothing.
Not even they could conceive the depravity of what this man had done.
Bella loves those big strap dresses. She likes long dresses. She was a girly girl. Always. She is just like, I always like to put her on a Supergirl t-shirt, and she loved it. Every time. She always be smiling though. Bella, you have to like really kind of, like, you want some gum? Like, she said you want some gum. She was looking at this picture. She's always just smiling at the camera.
Man, what I wish I would know the wheels in his head. It's either that monkey that's doing this, or he's trying to figure out how to lie or how to deceive, or just overall, I wish we could like know what he's thinking. You know, like when you watch cartoons and you can see like their bubble, like that's above their head, and you can see what they're thinking. I wish we could see what he's thinking.
I find him right. I need your help.
When I began my analysis of this case, I started with the very end, specifically when law enforcement interviewed Watts at Dodge Correctional in Wisconsin. Since that time, I have slowly worked my way back to the beginning. So you'll have to forgive me when I say that hearing Chris ask Detective Coder, "You're going to find them, right?" Those words make me see red. Listen, from the perspective of Chris, I get that he had to lie, and I understand that people use the excuse that he was an introvert, that somehow justifies his callous indifference. But none of that is an excuse for the heinous abomination waiting for these officers at Survey 319. And that's the reason why so many of us refuse to relent on this case. Because if Chris was coerced or encouraged in any way, this case should have ended in 2 convictions, not 1. But thankfully, Detective Coder is about to pivot and walk Chris into another ambush while forcing him to reveal his true motive, the real reason why he committed this crime.
Can we keep talking about some complicated things? Some things that are going to make you uncomfortable? That's fine. Okay. And I think you know why I have to ask them. Okay. And hard job. It's a hard job. It is a hard job. And I'm going to ask you one thing, and you're going to give me an answer, and I'm going to ask it just a slight bit different, and you're going to give me an answer, and then about 10 iterations of this, you might get annoyed, but I do have to make sure that we understand each other. Okay. Is that all right? Yeah. Okay. So we have your daughters who are missing. We have your wife who's missing. Okay. And that's the most important thing right now. Okay. Do you agree with that? Yes. Okay. So you've done very good in talking to me about this really hard conversation you guys had. Okay. Very good. That's sometimes hard. And I understand why sometimes someone in your position says, doesn't want to tell me about that. Because please go help me find my kids, and you don't need to know about my marriage argument. Okay. So I got to say, you've done very good at that. And
I wouldn't be in this room and being interviewed. I'd be looking for them.
I need you to keep doing that. So I need to ask you about your marriage and infidelity. Sure. Okay. Tell me about it. I have never cheated on my wife. Okay. And I fully suspect she's never done that to me. Oh, okay. Like, she's always been a trustworthy person. I've always been a trustworthy person. I fully expect if we ever thought
Was a trustworthy person
about straying another way, that we would tell each other before it happened. I think that sounds ridiculous.
I'm a trustworthy person. You remember just minutes ago, Chris used that same descriptor for himself when he lied and said that he did not harm his family. What we just saw was a masterful display of police work by Detective Coder. He used empathy and kindness to praise Chris for opening up about the argument that he claimed to have had with Shanann. And in so doing, Chris dropped his guard long enough to not see Coder counterpunch and force Watts to reveal another lie. Coder knows that Chris has been in near constant communication with Nicole Kessinger. He knows that Watts is lying about his question concerning
I wish this guy interviewed Nicole Kessinger. It wouldn't be that BS crap that we saw from Kobach.
Fidelity, and what Coder says next, well, there's only one way to describe it. Chef's kiss.
She's always been a trustworthy person. I've always been a trustworthy person. I fully expect if we ever thought about straying another way, that we would tell each other before it happened. I think that sounds ridiculous. Okay.
It does sound ridiculous.
In the history of the earth, nobody ever does that. I just that's what I would like to think. Okay.
And then sitting there laughing and joking and having fun, knowing that his wife is in the ground.
I know mistakes happen. Like, sure. Yeah. But that's what in my head. That's what I would think I would hope would happen. Okay. But now, even though I think that sounds ridiculous, if I was in your shoes, I'd say the exact same thing, and I believe that. Okay. But I kind of don't. And you can imagine in my job, I meet all kinds of people, and you can imagine that there are people who have Saturdays with their girlfriends and Sundays with their wives. Okay. Right. And they consider themselves to be very virtuous people.
And this is why I believe D.A. Rourke made
That sounds exhausting.
An enormous mistake by allowing this investigation to stop after just 86 days. Yes. Because Detective Coder and his counterpart, Agent Tammy Lee, were far and away the only law enforcement agents who understood how to get Chris Watts to talk. Detective Coder called out Watts' obvious lie, but he knows that he has a lot more information that could cause Chris to completely shut down.
And the professionals that have come forward and talked to me, they said the longer a case goes, not necessarily does it look bad, but it looks like either one, the detective can't do their job and find it, or two, that the murder was that, I wouldn't say successful, but they're not able to retrieve the information because obviously because of the people that are either hiding or um, have taken off or whatever have you. But technically, like when we watch the first 48, you have to find all the information within the first 48 because it's going to get harder. It's going to get worse. It's going to get like even harder to find evidence, information, the people involved, the weapon that was possibly used, which Chris, it's his hands. But again, the professionals that have come forward and told me is it necessarily looks really, really good when you pretty much get it done super fast. So, and why else would he possibly need it done really, really fast? Allegedly, again, it's possibility that it looked or he wanted to show that he was doing a fantastic job as a DA and how fast he got it prosecuted and put the man away for voting reasons. So just hypothetically, and it's also alleged, we can't prove it, but we just want to talk to NK and that they're not giving us the chance to do that.
Right now, Chris Watts is there on his own volition, and Coder understands that if
He could
pushes
leave
too hard, too fast, their investigation will come to a halt and will be funneled through the lens of an aggressive defense lawyer. It's a tight rope walk that Detective Coder does with masterful precision. And while Chris continues to deny having an affair, in the next few minutes, Detective Coder will change the subject entirely and expose Chris in another lie that he will not be able to recover from.
When did you start pulling it? It wasn't in the last 5 weeks. It's been an ongoing process for probably about a year. Why? I just felt like everything that we had when we first started dating and like we met in 2010, everything, your new relationship sparked, everything hot, everything's great.
He literally just changed the subject. Why did you fall out of love? And Chris was like, oh, rub my belly. Oh, by the way, we fell out of love because I met somebody else. We're just not compatible. Like, he doesn't realize the question that Coder was asking, and he's just giving them all away, or all the information away, and I don't think he even realizes that he's doing it.
Get married, everything's still great, and then people just fall out of love, and that's where I was. Like, I just felt like over the last year, I thought that okay, maybe this is just like a phase. Maybe it's
So he's saying within a year now, could that possibly? I mean, it's grabbing at straws that he fell out of love a year ago. But again, in September, that's when NK did her first Google searches of Chris and Shanann and so forth. So could it have been a year before? Or is it months?
This is what happens. Somebody so long, maybe the spark isn't there, just reunited somehow, some way. But our conversations weren't the same. Like when we were apart, everything was just short, and it was just nothing felt right anymore. The disconnection was there, and it just never felt right anymore. But why?
There is a very clear reason why Detective Coder is asking Chris about his marriage falling apart. This detective already knows that Watts began his affair with Kessinger around the same time that he claims his relationship with Shanann completely collapsed. Coder is trying to
Which if it did, it would have been a year before.
gauge what kind of person Watts is, and sadly, every time he asks the question, but why, he's obtaining a clear view of who Chris is and exactly what he was capable of doing. And can I just mention for a second how annoying it is that Chris is speaking fluent Nicholese right now? Listen, I'm not judging you if you use the word like as a filler word, but this is a grown man, and it's impossible not to notice that he talks exactly the same way that Nicole Kessinger does whenever she lies.
Thank you!
Conversations were the same, whenever we were apart, and it was just and I didn't...
He's doing what I'm doing. They both talk the exact same way about this case. and yet they got Chris, but they didn't take Nicole down?
You feel it like, Chris, for the love of God, stop it. Okay, I'm sorry, but I do have good news. We're going to skip the part where Watts continues to overuse the word like and arrive at the moment where Detective Coder finally confronts Chris. The moment where Chris will finally show real emotion, but not sadness or empathy or anything that a normal father would be feeling on the heels of losing his entire family. Chris Watts is about to show this seasoned detective the anger he's been hiding this whole time. Pay close attention to the next 10 minutes because it is the most important segment of this entire interview.
Okay.
So let's have the hard conversation again. Okay. How old are they? 4 and 3.
And he gets closer to like he's talking like a buddy or a dad to his son kind of thing.
So it'll be 5 in December. Okay. You can imagine that every day that goes by, it's harder to find. Where we don't find your girls, it's going to get harder to find. We're going to have less clues. Things that we need to get and we need to use, the methods that we need to do to find them are going to start getting blown away by weather, getting re-recorded over themselves that the surveillance board is going to tell us. All of that is going to disappear, okay? And that's why we're going to spend so much time today, tomorrow, as in the front as we can, right? You can also imagine that every day that goes by, we're going to be looking for the man who did this, okay? And you can imagine that we're going to include you as that man. Yeah. So, let's talk about that. I think that you're trying to put on a brave face because you're...
Man, the clock in the background is like intensing, or not intensing, but it's making me have tense feelings when this conversation's going on.
And your father and your husband. I can tell that there's just something you're not telling me. And I'm not sure what it is. I don't know why that is. I don't know why you're not telling me, but there's something that's making you a little bit uncomfortable.
His mistress.
I just don't believe some of the things you're telling me.
That he wants to be with.
Simply do not believe you.
Detective Coder has just called Chris out on the numerous lies that he already knows he's told. Coder clearly wants Chris to sit with the reality that the things he's told law enforcement do not ring true. And that's why he took the time to carefully construct this confrontation. It's why he told him directly that he simply does not believe him. Because the words that come out of Watts' mouth immediately after he's told that he's a liar tell law enforcement everything they need to know about the man sitting in front of them claiming to love his family.
And why didn't we ask NK, why are you lying? That was never a question to her. Why are you giving us this bull crap? Why did your phone ping in Frederick, Colorado the morning of the murders? Why did you delete the messages? None of those questions were asked. They literally asked, so when you went to the Lazy Dog, what did you have to eat? That's kind of the questions that were being asked. And then when he did get any closer to asking Kobach, the father, wait, don't lead, is what he was getting into things that Nicole Kessinger would have answered, but answered poorly. And Dwayne Kessinger knew that, and he was protecting his daughter, but he wasn't leading. And Dwayne Kessinger is not a lawyer either. So if Nicole Kessinger was by herself in that interview with her father, maybe we would have gotten something that could have portrayed her involvement, but I don't think we'll know, unfortunately, at least for right now.
I just don't believe some of the things you're telling me. Okay, I just don't. Simply do not believe you. What makes you think? What have I said that makes you not believe me at all? This just doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't add up.
What have I said that makes you not believe me at all? Those are the words of a guilty man. And if I knew nothing else about this case, and this was the only interview that I was ever allowed to see, this would be the moment that I knew that Chris Watts was guilty of this crime. No innocent.
I knew when Chris Watts was guilty is when he was talking at the interviews with the news reporters. I literally was on the couch with my fiance at the time because I wasn't doing YouTube at that time yet. And it came across the news and I watched it about his Chris Watts' first initial interview with the news reporters. And I was like, this man murdered his family. And my fiance was like, I don't know. He seems like he's a decent kind of person. I'm like, no way. This man murdered his family. And I thought at the time, I'm like, he has to have a mistress. Like, he has to have, like, a girlfriend on the side. Why else would you do this? And lo and behold, we find out later on that Chris has a mistress. Chris was like, because none of this came to us right away. We didn't see the interviews. We didn't see this video that we're watching in front of us right away. We had Chris Watts's interviews from the news reporters. We had some body cam footage here and there, and that's literally it. So I felt like I had a good hold on this case when I watched it back in 2018.
Innocent person would speak this way, but there's something very interesting about his answer that sheds light on the person sitting in that seat. For years, experts have opined that Watts' behavior demonstrates the actions of someone who is a disconnected introvert with
and the same thing goes for NK.
Signs of psychopathic tendencies. And he wants to know specifically what he said that sounds so incriminating so that he can change it. It's a near textbook example of the way that psychopaths...
Or he can go back to NK and tell her what they've been asking and so forth like that. Because that night, he calls Nicole and they have like a conversation for like 51 minutes. It's like 51 or 55. Prior to the night before where they had the 111-minute phone call. So what did they talk about on that phone call the day after the murders?
And sociopaths behave. But now that Coder...
Let's get our story right. Let's get our stories together. Let's do this. And that's when Chris was also on the phone with them, the police officers at 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock time frame. And then after that went to go talk to Nicole again. Like,
has him against the ropes, he will reveal a truth about Chris that is one of the most poignant and accurate descriptors of the man that would come from this investigation. The tale of two Chris's.
So can we talk about two Chris's? Okay. Two Chris's. The tale of two Chris's? Okay. And you need to help me know which Chris I'm looking at today and which Chris you really are. So Chris number one is right here, right? And fell out of love with his wife. Okay. Started wondering what it might be. He didn't have a wife to take care of and a girl to take care of. Spent some time alone. Liked that time alone. Came home.
He already technically had time alone when he was without her for 5 weeks. So he already loves it. He's even said he enjoys the bachelor life, working out, not having to deal with the girls, and so forth like that. So he got a little taste of freedom with NK.
Home. May or may not have had a conversation about how to get out of this marriage or how to fix it, but probably how to get out of it. Is looking at a bachelor pad in Brighton and did something terrible to his wife and kids. And that may have been an accident. And I think it was an accident. That's not the Chris we're looking at right now.
I want you to try to imagine.
We know it wasn't an accident. He's just trying to say that because then this idiotic person thinks, oh, it is an accident. I could use that against it and try to get off a little bit more time kind of thing.
That you are sitting in that seat right now. A veteran detective has just spent the last several hours revealing the numerous inaccuracies in your story, and now he's directly accusing you of committing a quadruple homicide. So what would you say in response? Well, if you're Chris Watts, your response is to say, that's not the Chris you're looking at right now. And in some weird and twisted way, that might actually be true because the man sitting in front of this detective isn't the same man who just hours before committed one of the most heinous crimes you could imagine. But I suppose it's good that Chris Watts was arrogant enough to think that he could talk his way out of this crime because it's the words he would speak over the next 24 hours that would guarantee that he would never see the outside of a prison cell for the rest of his natural life.
What do you think it's going to look like when when someone finds out that it was not you that called 911. Everybody's going to have their own perception about what's going
Or that you told Abby, don't call the police. Whoops.
on here. But I know my wife. I know that sometimes she doesn't text me back. I know that happens.
For this long?
I've been that. It's happened multiple times throughout many days. If she's busy with work, it doesn't happen.
Chris was just asked what he thinks the general public will say about his inaction concerning not having called 911. And in response, he says, everyone is going to have their own perceptions about what is going on here. For the last 7 years, Chris Watts has continuously shown his disdain for everyone who watched this case unfold in real time. He believes that he doesn't owe anyone anything at all. Not the truth, not accountability, and certainly not a sincere apology to the family whose lives he destroyed. But if you could distill my central reasoning for why I believe this case remains unresolved, it's because I believe that his lack of humility only lasted this long because he truly believed that this would end with Nicole Kessinger by his side.
Yep.
And while he will never live to see that day, I want to do everything in my power to make sure that Nicole Kessinger is held accountable for whatever her involvement may have been.
Amen,
and even
brother.
though the two of them will never be able to be together again, maybe they can settle for sharing matching jumpsuits instead.
We're back to his tale of two crazy Chris. Okay. There's a Chris who cares. I care. I promise. Tell me about the call to your daycare. To the primrose?
Oh!
I called them to see if
Sucker punch to the face.
the girls were there. They weren't there. Okay. I told them since they weren't there, just put them back on the waiting list. That's not what you told them. I told them that we were going to sell the house. We're going to put it on the market and we probably won't be in the area anymore. That's two different things, Chris. Well, I wanted them to be back on put them on the waiting list since they weren't there. Why weren't they there? I don't know. Where were they going to go? They went to Shanann took them to her friend's house. Why wasn't they go to daycare? I am not sure. Honestly, sir, I am not sure.
Detective Coder is in the final stages of this confrontation, and for the first time since Watts walked through that door, he's about to see that other Chris, the one he knows is responsible for this crime. Coder starts by asking Chris to explain what happened when he called Primrose to tell them that the girls would not be coming in that day. As usual, Chris lies. He says he called Primrose to see if the girls were there. Now, Coder knows that this is entirely untrue, but instead of ignoring it, he completely calls out his lie and lets Chris know that he knows it's a fabrication. Immediately, Chris pivots and concocts an entirely new set of lies, now saying that he told him that he was going to sell the house and asked to put the girls back on the waiting list. But law enforcement has already spoken with Primrose Elementary, and they know exactly what Chris said the day prior. And what he actually said was that the girls would no longer be attending that school at all. He never said anything about putting his house on the market, and Coder knows that. But the more he pushes Chris, the more that he can see this man has no interest in revealing any version of the truth. But watch this next segment closely, and specifically look at Watts' behavior and mannerisms, because Detective Coder is about to tell Chris the one thing that will cause him to show true colors and reveal the other Chris, the man who Detective Coder knows actually committed this crime.
It's hard for me as a father to talk to you about this. Not because it's the hardest to talk about. It's because I'm worried about your daughters under your care.
Coder cares more than he does.
Shouldn't have to worry about them under my care. I watched them all weekend. I went to a pool party at Jeremy Lindstrom's house. It's like, I love those kids with all my
Those
heart.
kids.
Nothing in this world would ever make me do anything to these kids or my wife.
This was truly some of the finest police work that was conducted by anyone during this investigation. Detective Coder has just sprung his trap and forced Chris to show who he really is. But I want to revisit that moment one more time as Chris responds to Coder saying, "I'm worried about your daughters under your care." Listen to his tone and the way that Chris responds to that statement.
I'm worried about your daughters under your care. You shouldn't have to worry about them under my care. I watched them all weekend.
Did you hear that? Just how angry Chris sounds when he
Pissy.
said, "I watched them all weekend." It's one of the only times that we get to hear and see what Chris Watts is truly capable of. You see, Chris spent most of his
Like, nobody wants to be questioned as a parent because they feel that they're raising their kids the right way. So a good parent would not be, how do I want to say this? if you challenged me to tell me that I'm not doing my part as a father, that would upset me. So when Coder says that about Chris, I can see where he's getting a little pissy, but at the same time, Chris is technically the one that murdered his girls that we know of. Allegedly, we think it's NK.
His life hiding in plain sight. He fooled everyone around him into a false sense of security that he was a safe and harmless man, because he doesn't seem to understand that just because he was a generally good person before the morning of August 13th, that does nothing to change what he did. In this case, the bad so far outweighs the good that even mentioning the man he was before is a slap in the face to the memory of his entire family. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Some of the most dangerous people you'll ever meet, they're the quiet ones. The people who hold in their anger and do just like Chris said in this interview. The people who stay quiet and take it. And if you ever have the misfortune of meeting someone like that, there's only one thing you should do.
Right.
Run.
Ha! Told ya.
Nothing you told me tonight feels like the truth. Can we start over? Sure. I think that there's something that happened that got maybe a little bit out of control. There was no fight. There was nothing physical.
I think if they knew about this possible fight that they had, I just don't know why they let Chris go home unless they could have given him like a 24-hour hold or a psychiatric hold, or I don't know. But I don't agree with letting him go home, because he was able to clean up. He was able to pick things or put things away and possibly talk to NK and get their stories aligned. And maybe I'm wrong, but I've asked the people that were the professionals, or they are the professionals. A lot of them did say that they probably would have tried to put him on a hold for something. But if he didn't have a record, it would have been hard to do.
It was a conversation.
But he was a person of interest.
There's no, we didn't raise our voice, nothing.
You didn't.
I promised you that. So there was nothing physical with this conversation.
You cut her off guard.
Nothing you've told me tonight makes sense. Nothing you've told me tonight feels like the truth. The words that Detective Coder just spoke are powerful, and they force Chris to come to the realization that this isn't going away, that he is going to have to reveal the truth, or at least some version of it. But in response to this direct confrontation of Watts' entire timeline of events, what we see is Chris choosing to continue to lie. And his obstinate refusal to share space with the truth forces Detective Coder to the realization that the only way they will find Shanann and the girls is to force this man to see the truth, to see that there's no way out. But before Detective Coder concludes this first interview with their prime suspect, he will place one final piece of bait on the line and ask Chris the question that every good law enforcement investigator knows to ask. The question that will eliminate any further doubt of who is responsible for the disappearance of Shanann, Bella, and Cece.
When we find the guy who took him, what do you think we should do? Honestly, they're gonna come home safe, correct? When you find the guy. When we find the guy, they're gonna come home.
What if they never come home?
Would be that's what I would think with 2 kids.
When we find the guy who took them, what do you think we should do? That's a question that law enforcement uses to gauge the subtle and overt response of the suspect they are interrogating. The idea is simple. An innocent man in the situation would likely advocate for the most serious sentence available. They would demand justice and want the offender to be shown the most serious form of punishment the law would allow. On the other hand, a guilty person would support a much lighter sentence because they know that that sentence is going to be the one they serve. And what we just saw was Chris Watts playing the award-winning role of the guiltiest man alive. But isn't it strange that Watts asked Detective Coder the question, they're gonna come home safe, correct? I'm sorry, but what kind of stupid question is that? I'm starting to wonder if Watts suffered from some kind of TBI, because that's
why I don't think that he was the only one in this crime, because he's not smart enough.
only logical explanation for such a shockingly idiotic question like that. Now, just for a second, indulge me. In what universe would this detective possibly know whether or not your children are coming home safe or not, Chris?
None.
Now, I'm not dumb. I know you probably thought it was smart to try and sound like you believed your family was safe and coming home. But in retrospect, everything you just said, in light of what we know you did, is completely disgusting. And the worst part of it all is that you are now using religion to shield yourself and hide behind it so that you don't have to take public responsibility for.
That's why he does what he does in prison right now with saying he's a holy man. He's hiding behind it.
For your own actions. But don't worry, because Chris isn't done humiliating himself yet. In fact, he's about to double down.
What if you hurt them?
He's not very good at poker.
I'm not sure if like that penalty is even used. Is it used in Colorado? I'm not even sure what is the death penalty. Okay. I mean, like if these kids are not alive, like there's nothing you could do to.
It's kind of interesting that he says that. The whole death penalty, I don't think Colorado has the death penalty. Maybe he knew the entire time, if I murder my family, I'm not going to get put to death. I'll just get life in prison. Maybe that's what they, I don't know. Maybe I'm just grabbing at straws.
To cope with that, to make me cope with that, if those kids are not okay.
Okay, so let's review the nonsense words we just heard. And I quote, I mean, like, if these kids are not alive, there's nothing you could do to cope with that, to make me cope with that, if those kids are not okay, unquote. Now, if I didn't know any better, I would say that this is the first alpha build of a ChatGPT response that is so filled with complete BS that it no longer qualifies as existing within the lexicon of the English language. But let's go ahead and break it down. Chris just said that if these kids are not alive, wait, did you mean your kids, Chris? But then he says, there's nothing you could do to cope. And it's almost like immediately he realizes how dispassionate he sounds. So he corrects himself by saying that if something happened to those kids, not his kids, there's nothing you could do to make him cope with that. Chris, let me hold your hand with a paper towel in between and say the obvious thing right now. This is not how a concerned father who actually loves their children talks about their disappearance.
No, they don't.
It's here, at the conclusion of this first interview, that I want to reiterate something very important. I accept that Chris Watts is responsible for this crime, that his actions leave the only logical conclusion that he actually deserves far worse than spending the rest of his life in prison. But we have to remember that
I think he should be tortured on the brink of his life. He should be not comfortable. And this man is getting ready to be married. Try to be somewhat happy. He probably has friends, acquaintances, and so forth.
in the eyes of the law, Chris Watts can retain responsibility for this crime. He can spend the
Went right to the door, or the door of the car, not going inside the house.
rest of his life hiding behind a veil of prison religion, while at the same time sharing the legal responsibility of this crime anyone else who is involved in any way. Until now, I have been reticent to say these words, but they are important in light of what is
I wonder if this is a speaker or like a mic, because I just don't know what this thing is on the wall. Or is it like, it's not like temperature control inside there.
has been revealed over the last several chapters of our analysis. I believe the evidence we've uncovered supports the claim that Nicole Kessinger is likely involved with directing, encouraging, or inspiring Chris Watts to commit this crime. And
Which Gypsy Rose served time because of that reason.
that is precisely how Charles Manson was charged and sentenced to life in prison. The law recognized that his influence, direction, and coercion was the central cause of those horrific crimes. So there's only one thing left to say. District Attorney Michael Rourke, it's time to do your job. The job you were elected to do. It's time to put aside your pride, your ego, and your inability to accept criticism. And finally, do what justice demands. Because frankly, after all these years, I'm sick and tired of watching the entire true crime community do your job for you. Over the last several years, there has been a considerable shift in the political climate throughout the United States of America. But no
Agreed.
matter what side of the aisle you are on, one thing we can all agree on is that our elected officials remain accountable to us. No one is immune from criticism, most especially the DA of Weld County, Colorado. Until now, everyone who is even remotely familiar with the story has been told by DA Rourke, CBI, and local
This guy right here did a fantastic job.
law enforcement that Chris and Nicole communicated
When I say this guy, I'm talking about the guy that's on the right of DA Rourke.
for the very last time on the morning of August 14th, 2018. Law enforcement tells us that they confirmed this with Chris's cell phone records, despite admitting to never properly searching Nicole Kessinger's phone or the myriad of information that she intentionally deleted from it. Because we know that at 6:21 p.m., the day of August 14th, Nicole Kessinger was busy searching the internet for news concerning the disappearance of Shanann
4 hours. She was looking that up.
and the girls, the same person she would claim that she was not at all concerned for her safety.
Or when she said Shanann's name, she did this.
But in Detective Prill's report, he notes Nicole's detailed and obsessive searches that she continuously conducted over the course of several hours throughout that day. Searches that were all deleted. But the detective, he takes it further and writes the following. These searches were conducted frequently by Kessinger throughout the next several days. She deleted every single one of them after.
Why would you delete the search history that you were looking for Shanann? Why else? Because you didn't want to get caught. Why does anybody else clean up the crime scene? Because they don't want to get caught. Why else would Nicole delete messages, text messages, photos, search histories? Because she possibly, allegedly, was involved.
After each search. We also know that at 5 p.m. that same afternoon, Nicole was frantically searching the internet, wanting to know, can cops trace text messages, and how long do phone companies keep text messages? Detective Prill's report could not have been more clear. He was practically pleading with his fellow law enforcement colleagues to conduct further investigation into the uncertainty of where Chris and Nicole were communicating from. But in case you need a reminder, let's briefly revisit a mere fraction of the facts we now know concerning Nicole Kessinger's treasure trove of lies. Time and time again, we have demonstrated the numerous occasions when Nicole Kessinger's story simply did not line up with the truth. We have proven that Nicole lied about not knowing Shanann's name, a name that she searched on Google half a year before ever claiming to have met Chris Watts at all.
Was not a typo.
That Nicole patently misrepresented the seriousness of her relationship with Chris, lying to law enforcement and downplaying the constant pressure that she was applying to him in order to compel him to leave his wife Shanann. We also know that she told Chris that he would have to choose between her and his wife, and we proved that Nicole lied and claimed to be encouraging Chris to fix things with Shanann during his family trip to North Carolina, but in reality was sending Chris daily nude images to entice him to choose her instead.
While he was in North Carolina, when she said, I wanted Chris to go there and try to fix things with his wife, you're full of poppycock, because she was sending images, nude images, to him. They were calling each other back and forth. And yet, Nicole Kessinger might be, I think she's not involved. I think we don't have to go look at her. Are you flipping kidding me?
And the evidence substantiates that on the morning of August 13th, 2018, at the same time that Chris was in the process of covering up his crimes, Nicole Kessinger's phone pinged in Frederick at the cell tower.
And they want to say that it was because she was driving to work. The only other times that she pinged in Frederick, Colorado is when she was at Chris's house. The 2 to 3 times that she said. It was like the 4th and then like the 18th of July. When she went to work, it was not on that tower. Why else would she make a phone call? And she made the phone call to Jim. But yet we're just losing it behind our screens and our keyboards. We can see the bull crap.
directly next to the Watts residence. And in this episode alone, we've learned that the road that led up directly behind the Watts residence was a perfect route in and out of their home, which would have ensured that Nicole would not have been detected.
And I can tell you right now, all these junior detectives behind their screens, the YouTuber or other YouTube channels that I've watched and so forth, they have done an outstanding job compared to Chris Watts or DA Rourke. They deserve praise. I just got on the bandwagon a year and a half ago. They've been doing it since day one.
By the neighbor's security camera. The sheer volume of circumstantial and physical evidence that supports or suggests Nicole Kessinger's influence or outright involvement in this crime is both shocking and substantial. So when we arrive at this moment on the evening of August 14th, the day after the crimes were committed, and we see Detective Prill nearly shouting at the DA, telling them that Nicole Kessinger was hiding a trail of information, it demands that DA Rourke finally answer this question. Mr. Rourke, why did no one in law enforcement or in your office ever bother to ask Watts or Kessinger where these pictures were coming from? Your discovery evidence clearly demonstrates that you conclusively verified that the pictures were not coming from Chris's text messages. So then why didn't you do your job and ascertain their origin? Now hold on, before you answer, I actually have good news for you, sir. Because after 7 years of you and your office outright refusing to properly investigate Nicole and determine the truth, I want to let you know that I've done your job for you.
Oh!
See, I know the answer to that question, and before I tell it to you, I want to read this segment from your discovery evidence.
Oh, it's going to get filthy here in a second.
One final time. I am certain Watts communicated far more with Kessinger than is reflected in his phone data, perhaps facilitated through the secret calculator application. It became apparent he was receiving assorted nude images of Kessinger that she was taking by herself and sending to Watts, which he then stashed in that application to prevent Shanann from ever seeing them. Months ago, I spoke with Chris Watts' former cellmate neighbor, Dylan Tallman. During our interview, I asked Tallman a series of questions concerning his friendship with Watts during their incarceration.
I talked to David through Instagram, and I told him I wanted to do an interview. I would pay for the interview, and then he just dropped off. Like, I'm just curious. I'm still willing to do it, but I did talk to David, not too far in depth. I just pretty much I want to do an interview with you, and that's about it.
Incarceration. It was during our conversation that Tallman randomly brought up the information about Watts and Kessinger's activities, and without even asking, he told me exactly where they were communicating from. The following is a brief excerpt from that interview.
Chris he got in a fight with Shanann and over this stuff. Like, I know he said something about using a WhatsApp, and the only way you can access that WhatsApp is if you go on his phone.
Wait. Chris said he had a WhatsApp account?
Yeah, that's what he told me.
Wait.
WhatsApp.
Hold on.
It was WhatsApp.
Has anyone from law enforcement ever asked you about this?
No.
So Chris admitted that he was communicating with Nicole over WhatsApp?
Yeah, that's like Facebook. It's like
Right. No, I know what it is.
Twitter.
It's
a profile you have. Like, we have.
Yep. It's a messenger service.
So here, looking at it, I can see message privately. With private messaging and calling, you can be yourself, speak freely, and feel close to the most important people in your life, no matter where they are. Never miss a moment with voice and video calls. Speak freely. Are secured with a lock. Only you and the person you're talking to can read or listen to them, and no one else. Not even WhatsApp. Are you flipping kidding? Whether it's planning on outing with your friends or simply staying on top of the family, say what you feel, express, use stickers, GIFs. So not even WhatsApp can look at them. Catch up on conversations with private messaging summaries. I've heard of WhatsApp before, but I didn't know like how It's almost like Snapchat. Snapchat was made for cheaters, man. Like, you can call, message, send photos, and then it makes it look like you never even sent them.
Chris Watts and
That's why I don't have Snapchat.
Nicole Kessinger were communicating from the third-party application WhatsApp. So I would like to ask you, the audience, why in God's name is a YouTuber finding this new critical case information nearly 7 years after this case was closed? How can DA Rourke or anyone in his office claim to have done their job when we are still finding out new information over half a decade after the fact? Because the next logical step in this process would be to find out what...
I wonder if they can like retrieve any of that, or, I mean, probably not with it being 7 years later.
Chris and Nicole said in those messages to subpoena and obtain the records, the logs, and data from what...
And if we want to know if this Dylan Tallman is telling the truth, give him a lie detector. I know you can't use it in court. Lie detectors you can't use in court, but it could give us a baseline.
WhatsApp and ascertain what Nicole knew at what time and the extent of what she was hiding. And as I've said, there is a reason why so many current and former members of law enforcement have continued to speak out in these comment sections, because...
And they're coming to my channel. I mean, I think they're coming to ATS News. They're coming to a whole bunch of other YouTubers. They've come to me and said the same thing. Like, I'm not researching police officers and lawyers and doctors, morticians, and they're coming to me.
They recognize that this case remains incomplete. So the next time someone tells me, why do you still talk about this case? I'll remind them that if I can find out new information about Chris Watts this long after the case was considered closed, then I can only imagine what else law enforcement could find if they would simply do their job. Last month, on May 30th, the Shelland County Sheriff's Department received a call from Whitney Decker. She explained that her daughters had not returned home from a scheduled visitation.
They still haven't found this guy. How? Like, I know how to go dark, but I guarantee the police would find me. How the hell has this man not been found? The only way that I think he hasn't been found is he's gone. He self-deleted himself. I guarantee it. That's why they can't find him.
With their father, Travis. After a weekend of frantic searching, law enforcement would eventually locate Decker's truck near an empty campground in central Washington. Eventually, the remains of 5-year-old Olivia, 8-year-old Evelyn, and 9...
I guarantee he's changed his scent. I guarantee he's changed his look. I guarantee he's changed everything about himself.
9-year-old Peyton were found a short distance from the campsite. Their father, Travis Decker, remains the subject of a nationwide manhunt and is the primary suspect in the triple homicide of his own daughters.
It's been a month and a half.
These cases aren't about maintaining a high conviction rate. They're about justice. And for some reason, the Weld County DA has completely forgotten that. Every single time I sit in front of this computer, every time I read the words of a coroner or study the interrogation of a determined detective, every single time I try to comprehend the confession of a father who chose his own selfishness over the lives of his children, I am reminded of my reason why. Why I choose to stand with each of you, to remind those around us why these lives matter so much. Because somewhere in the eyes of these children, we see the reflection of our own sons and daughters, and in some infinitesimally small way, we feel the pain of their loss. Because at the heart of every case where a life is...
They weren't my daughters, but I feel more of a father than Chris did. I feel that these girls should have had the chance to grow up and be young little ladies, have a family of their own, and he took it away because he wanted some... I want to say something, but I can't because of YouTube guidelines, over another woman.
Stolen is the realization that we want this nightmare to end. We want to arrive at a time and place where innocence no longer has to fear the selfishness of anyone capable of committing these crimes.
Should never take
and
a
I know,
life.
like so many of you, these little ones, they're our reason why. because all I know is if this was my daughter, if this was my mother,
I would not
my sister,
stop.
or my friend, if I had known Shanann, Bella, and Cece, or if I had been the one to comfort the Rooshchecks during the worst moment of their lives, and someone out there who had a hand in this crime remained free, and if now, all these years later, she enjoys a life where her guilt has transformed her
She's just a little bit thicker.
into a shell of the woman she was, I would want someone to do what I'm
That's Kessinger. We've already proved it.
doing right now. And I
Facial
would hope
recognition
that they would choose
software.
to fight even when I couldn't. Because sometimes doing the right thing feels completely impossible, and it requires more of us than we know how to give.
We gotta
But as
stand
long
together.
as the truth remains unknown, and as long as justice is out of reach, I know that I'm not alone when I say, we will not give up. We owe it to Shanann, Bella, Cece, and Nico to continue to fight for a new investigation, to renew our commitment to advocate for justice, and to do whatever it takes to bring the truth to light.
Amen, brother. See how precious she is?
I want to touch the plate. No. Blow on it, Cece. Blow, Cece, blow. Guess what, girls? Mommy has a baby in her belly. Are you guys excited? Yes? Are you really excited? Oh my goodness. How many hugs? Oh. I love you. I love the baby. You need a baby hug? I love you, Bella. You're so sweet.
Hi, buddy.
Say hey, everybody.
Hi, everybody. Hi, buddy. Hi, buddy.
Everybody, let's invite Nana and Papa.
Papa.
Oh, Pop-Pop's on. Say hi, Papa.
Hi, Papa. Hi, Papa. Hi, Bobo.
Say hi, Papa.
Hi, Papa.
She was such a good big sister.
Don't take her away.
I'm not taking her away.
They deserve justice.
In closing today, I want to take a moment to tell every person who is listening to the sound of my voice
Every time behind Criminal Minds, man. Jeez Louise. Ugh.
just how grateful I am to have you here. Being able to create content is one of the most amazing gifts that each of you give me by affording me your
If you guys want to watch the end of his clip, I'm just gonna leave it there. I don't want to cry anymore. I'm so emotionally drained today. I don't know why. I'm frustrated. Because just looking at the clips and stuff, it's like right there in front of our face. And we can't grab it because we're like on the opposite side of the island. The Watts Island's over here. We can see it. We can talk about it, but we can't get in there to figure out what exactly happened. And they're keeping us away from that. And it just pisses me off. I just want to be told, yep, she's innocent. Okay, let's see the findings. Oh, okay. There's no way that she could be there. Or holy crap, guys, she was involved, and we need to start this case or trial. How hard is that? We may never see the light of justice, but I feel that God and the big man upstairs will have them answer for their connections, their alleged possible involvement. At least we have that to know about. But please keep your thoughts, your comments, your opinions down below in the comments. Did I just say that twice? I thank everybody for watching. Hopefully this video didn't make you too emotional. It started making me once you see those little girls and how much they had to look forward to. Again, thank you guys for being here. Please take care, be safe. As always, keep nerding on, and we will see you guys in the next video.